Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast. I am your host, Roy Garden, where we discuss all things Donald Trump and the Trump White House in the news cycle from this past week. And we've got a lot to talk about. Of course, most of it's going to focus on the war in Iran, as that's been pretty much the top news leader. But we also discuss other things like the economy and things going on here in the state of Florida, where this podcast originates from. So having said that, let's go ahead and get right into it. Before I talk about the war in Iran and the latest breaking news, let's do a little follow-up on Trump's SAVE Act that he's trying to pass. Trump issued a blunt message to Senate Majority Leader to pass the voter ID legislation as John Thune battles conservative blowback for refusing to alter Senate rules and mandate a traditional talking filibuster that would force Democrats to hold the floor to block the Save America Act. Donald Trump had a blunt message to the Senate Majority Leader. He's got to be a leader, the president told reporters outside the White House this past week. The upper chamber's top Republican has said he'll likely hold a vote on the legislation, which requires proof of citizenship while registering to vote and significantly curbs mail-in voting. However, the staunch Democratic opposition means it will probably fall short of the 60 votes threshold needed to advance. Thune has said the votes aren't there for a talking filibuster or doing away with the legislative filibuster altogether. So the so-called nuclear option is not going to happen. And Trump said it was up to the South Dakota lawmaker to get things done regardless of what he thinks. Of course, that's typical Donald Trump. You know, he wants things his way or the highway. And, this is not going to pass on a federal level. But I am going to be talking to you about what happened here in the state of Florida, where our mini-Trump, Governor Ron DeSantis, got his all-Republican legislature to do as far as their own version of the Save America Act. But I'm going to save that for later for when I talk about the Florida news. So having said that, let's get right into what's going on with the Iranian war. And, of course, that's going to be my top podcast story for this particular podcast for this week because everything is just breaking. And in fact, what is breaking is just what happened just here yesterday afternoon. I taped these podcasts on Saturday so I can get all the news that I possibly can before I start taping so we can talk about it. Now, the United States has attacked Karg Island, which is a major Iranian oil depot export station. They just did this yesterday afternoon, and Trump, of course, blames victory, or not blames, but stated victory, and that he said that, everything was totally obliterated except for the oil pumps that are there, and he saved those, but he said he'll destroy those too if Iran doesn't get in shape and order where they want to be. So he said that every military target was hit on Iran's critical oil export hub, and he is threatening to attack the island's oil infrastructure if Tehran continues blocking ships from using the Strait of Hormuz. And this, of course, is going to lead up into the U.S.-Israeli attack that's been going on. Now, Trump, of course, downplayed the risk of the energy markets as a short-term concern that should not overshadow the mission to decapitate the Iranian regime. In response to the Iranian threats, commercial shipping has come to a standstill in the Gulf, as you're well aware of. Now, this ongoing war with Iran is costing billions of dollars, and we all know that. And it just continues to escalate, although Pete Hegseth says it's not escalating. Now, what we need to talk about here, ladies and gentlemen, briefly, is, of course, our oil prices here in the United States. And this is all controlled because oil is not getting through the Strait of Hormuz, and it's effectively closed. Now, since the beginning of the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran on February 28th of 2026 of this year, that's when it kind of all started. Oil tanker traffic through the world's most critical oil shipping choke point has collapsed, dropping by more than 90%. This is why you're seeing the rising gas prices. Iran has threatened to destroy any ships, including oil tankers, that pass through the strait from the oil depots of the Persian Gulf into the Arabian Sea into the rest of the world. As you can see by this graphic, folks, that is just a 20-mile gap, and that's why the Iranians are able to shell the ships that are going through, except their own ships, of course. And as you're well aware of, Donald Trump has told the people that steer these ships to have some guts and get those ships through there anyway, which is absolutely stupid remark. And why don't Trump get it behind one of the wheels of those boats and run them through? If he's so good about having guts, that's what he tells these people to do that. But, the companies, that, of course, that insure these ships, their insurance rates have just skyrocketed. And yes, the oil tankers are insured in case of damage. And now their premiums have just gone through the roof because of the war that's going on. I mean, it just makes common sense. Now, because of the war zone. Now, the international body that sets many shipping regulations has told these ships' crews that they have to have the right to refuse to sail in the area. And, of course, as of March 6, more than 400 tankers were stranded in the Persian Gulf without permission from their owners to move because of the insurance. But some vessels are still transitioning to the strait. Most of the ships still moving are those that operate outside of the United States rules, are called ghost ships. And also the tankers that are shipping oil to China, which is one of the major customers, they're getting through. All right. And so this is just some of the stuff that's going on. And they just ignore the international restrictions. And, of course, if Iran hits them or not, that's just kind of up to them. Now, on land, armed personnel are closely monitoring the carefully area that's going through there. And it's a system that governs international shipping as its foundation, of course, is all voluntary. Now, on February 18th, as President Trump weighed whether to launch military attacks on Iran, Chris Wright, the energy secretary, told an interviewer that he was not concerned that the looming war might disrupt oil supplies in the Middle East and wreak havoc on the energy markets, which, of course, as you're well aware, he's dead wrong. And this, folks, is just going on and on. Now, what else has happened here just recently is there's an act called the Jones Act that was lifted, and what that does, that was restricting the Russia from exporting oil to the United States. That has since been lifted, and Russia was stymied when this was all in place. They weren't moving oil anywhere hardly, and so their oil was down to like $60 a barrel. And now that this has been lifted and Russia can now export oil to the United States, guess what? That oil has just shot up to around $90 to $100 a barrel, which is where the market is right now. This is why we're paying nearly $4 a gallon for gas here in the U.S. So Russia goes, oh, okay, we'll ship you oil. Here's your price, dudes. And of course that's going to backfire. It was a dumb move to make, in my opinion, and here's why. Now that has been lifted and Russia is now going to start getting humongous profits from being able to sell their oil, that's going to improve the economy, which we had almost had stagnated by these rules in place. And that means that they're going to have more money to build up their military, which means that they're going to be able to go right back into Ukraine because they're going to have the money in place and build up the military. And that's going to cause a problem for Ukraine. And Ukraine right now is not getting much help from us because we're putting all of our money and our military actions into Iran right now. So as you can see, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going on here, and it's a god dang sad situation that we've gotten ourselves into. But I digress. So but again with the Strait of Hormuz, with the mine, they put mines in the straits there, and I know we just made the attack on their depot just north of the straits there, and whether that's going to disrupt anything anymore or make the Iranians more agitated or whether they're going to say okay, we got to make some peace here, I doubt it, because Trump doesn't know when this thing's going to end. He talks on both sides of his mouth as when this is going to come to an end, and we know that the Strait of Hormuz is important. Now, speaking of the straits, as you're well aware of, Pete Hegseth just had a presser. And I have a clip of that, which I'm going to run here in just a second. But if you watch that presser, he did nothing but condemn the media for talking about, when's this war going to end and how it's kind of growing and how, the media is ridiculous and, you folks need to fall in line in the media and you need to say positive things about this war. And again, just like President Trump, Pete Hegseth is he wants a state-controlled media. Being that he has now got the Department of War and Pete, buy me a drink, Hegseth thinks that, we all need to get out there and fall in line and just report positive things. A state-controlled media is a good thing to have. There is no such thing as a freedom of the press under the Trump administration. You all need to talk about what we want you to talk about, and if you don't, you're going to pay. So in this particular case, Pete said that we don't need to worry about what's going on in the Straits of Hormuz. Watch this brief clip.
And do here at the Department of War with the bottom line up front for the world to hear and the press to actually admit that the United States is decimating the radical Iranian regime's military in a way the world has never seen before. Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated. We said it would not be a fair fight, and it has not been. As I stated during our first press conference on day 2, that was 10 short days ago, the combination of the world's 2 most powerful air forces is unprecedented and unbeatable. Between our air force and that of the Israelis, over 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's well over 1,000 a day. No other combination of countries in the world can do that. So today, as we speak, we fly over the top of Iran and Tehran. Fighters and bombers all day picking targets as they choose. As our intelligence gets better and better and more refined. Looking up, the IRGC and Iranian regime sees only 2 things on the side of aircraft: the Stars and Stripes and the Star of David. The evil regime's worst nightmare. Iran has no air defenses. Iran has no air force. Iran has no navy. Their missiles, their missile launchers and drones being destroyed or shot out of the sky. Their missile volume is down 90%. Their one-way attack drones yesterday, down 95%. And as the world is seeing, they are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with. We have been dealing with it and don't need to worry about it.
Now, I think as the media is reporting, that I think this administration totally underestimated the strength of Iran. And yes, I'm sure we have depleted their missile capability. And yes, I'm sure with the bombing of the ships that their Navy has been depleted. But these folks still have a lot of resources. And Russia, as I just talked to you about Russia, well, Russia, of course, is giving military intelligence to Iran to where the United States has some of their bases and things like that. And Trump seems to think that's no big deal. Says, "Oh, we do the same thing." I mean, his old buddy over there, Putin. He sure, that's okay. You can give him some intelligence, but this is the other thing. Now we lifted the the Jones Act, and we've allowed Russia to start exporting oil to the U.S. And of course, we know Russia gives the Iranians intelligence, but that's okay too. So and of course, Pete gets all upset because the press reports on stuff like this, and of course, we as you just heard, we lost 6 more military personnel with a plane that crashed, and they said it was not an act of any military intervention. It was just an unfortunate accident. But again, I think they're all underestimating these things that are going on, okay? So, the United States officials have had to adjust plans on the fly, as I told you, and this is why they don't have any answers to when this thing's actually going to end. From hastily ordering the evacuation of embassies to developing a policy proposals to reduce gas prices, and of course, gas has skyrocketed. They didn't think that was going to happen, and Trump says, just blow it off. So what? What you got to pay in the short term is going to have a better effect on the total outcome. That's fine and dandy for people who have got tons of money. As you all know, Trump doesn't pay a dime for fuel. Pete Hegseth doesn't pay a dime for fuel because they haul their butts all over the place in cars and in planes. So they don't have a clue how the average guy that lives paycheck to paycheck's got to pay for their fuel. And a lot of people commute more than 30 or 40 miles to work back and forth. And gas that used to cost them probably $30 to $40 a week is now costing them $60, $70 a week. We are seeing more people pulling out their credit cards to pay for this fuel. And therefore, the debt ceiling is rising because these people don't have the damn money. But these people that sit in their ivory towers, spending billions of dollars, our tax dollars, don't understand that. They really don't. And if they do understand it, they don't care. Suck it up. That's what they said. Have some guts. So anyway, after the Trump administration gave a closed-door briefing to lawmakers this past Tuesday, Senator Chris F. Murphy, who's a Democrat from Connecticut, said on social media that the administration had no plans for the Strait of Hormuz and did not know how to get it safely back open. Now, as you're well aware of, they were talking about these, Navy ships perhaps blocking the Strait of Hormuz and as far as offering assistance for the boats that go through and the ships. But again, in this presser that Pete Hegseth just had, the commander there said that, we'd like to get ships in there to escort these tankers through, but that's probably a month or more away. Right now, we got to concentrate on other things. So, as far as getting military escorts for these ships, I don't know when that's going to happen because we got our ships that we're using on other assignments. Now, another ship has just sailed from the U.S. with over about 5,000 Marines on it. That they're heading to the Middle East. Of course, where they're going is classified at this point in time, but it's interesting to note that we now have Marines on these ships heading to the Middle East. And, of course, the biggest fear that has been all along is, are we going to have boots on the ground? And now we've got Marines going over there. And again, Pete Hegseth says all options are open, but right now we don't have any plans for having boots on the ground. I call BS on it. I bet we do. Because why else would they be sending 5,000 Marines? Probably have them on standby just in case. But, they have been careful now to express that directly to the president, what's going on as far as being, in support or not in support of this military action. Of course, all the Republicans are behind them. The Democrats are not. And Trump has laid out, maximalist goals like insisting that Iran name a leader who will submit to him, which they have not done. The Ayatollah's son is now supposedly in charge. Of course, there has been extreme rumors that he is injured himself. He has not made any public appearances, and Pete Hegseth said his face is disfigured. We don't know that, and he is still making statements, but, not physically. It's all been done in writing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have described narrow and more tactical objectives that could provide an off-ramp in the near term. And Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said the administration had a strong game plan. We don't know what that is either, before the war broke out, and vowed that oil prices would drop after it ended. Okay, so when it ended. Economists have also said that even if the war were to end a month from now, gas prices will stay 20% higher at least till the end of the year, and that is only and if this war was to end in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So, to say that, gas prices will be coming down very shortly, just hang in there, is not going to happen. So the perceivable disruption in the oil market by the Iranian regime is short-term and necessary for the long-term game of wiping out these terrorists and the threat that they pose to America and the world, she said in a statement. Again, all these White House administration people who are all billionaires in their own right, they don't have a clue how the average American citizen is living paycheck to paycheck and how these gas prices going up is going to affect them. Again, I go back, do you remember when gas prices went up just about 2%, and all these MAGA people put those little Biden stickers on the gas pump that said, "I did that," but you don't see them putting the Trump sticker on these gas pumps right now and saying, "I did that," do you? And they're, no, of course not. This is different. Oh, God bless America and God bless the USA and blah, 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 So, it's just odd how, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. But again, the media has come out and said that they don't have a real game plan. Trump said he'll end the war when he feels like it. He actually said that. He goes, "When I feel in my bones, I guess I could bring this to an end, but I just don't feel it right now." And of course, he has grown frustration of how the war is disrupting oil supply too. But they don't know how to get that Strait of Hormuz closed down and opened up again to where it's under U.S. control, or at least under a bilateral control, until they can get some ships in there to help protect the tankers. And the Navy has no plan to do that, at least for the next 30 days. So at least expect a month of this disruption to go on and on. And that's really kind of sad. He just, when you don't have a game plan, this is what happens. So, and for Trump to say, "When I feel it in my bones," that's something that's pretty strange too. All right. And moving on to some other comments here, podcaster Joe Rogan said supporters of President Trump are starting now to feel betrayed by what he's called the insane conflict with Iran. Well, it just seems so insane based on what people are feeling right now. I mean, this is why a lot of people, especially in the MAGA base, are starting to feel betrayed. Now, some surveys say the MAGA people are all in line. They're all in favor of this Iranian war, and it's okay. They don't care about the local economy here. Whatever we got to do to stop this thing, that's great. But that's not what Joe Rogan is saying. In his latest episode of his podcast, he went on to say, "No more wars." That's what Trump was saying when he campaigned. "No more wars. I'm not a warmonger, blah, 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 blah." But as soon as he got in office, Pete Hegseth changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and he's just letting Pete run out there and spend billions of our tax dollars to start blowing up everybody. All right? So no more wars. That's what Trump campaigned on, and I've showed you clip after clip of that in my previous podcast. And so a number of GOP lawmakers have raised concerns about Iran becoming a proactive commitment for the United States after it was embroiled in 2 decades of conflict during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, the latest in politics and policy has shown that there has been a change in that with Iran, as you are well aware of. And transparency here. Yes, Iran has killed thousands of Americans throughout these past 3 decades. That's a gimme. We know that. And it's terrible what they've been doing. But when you work through the back channels, sometimes better things can happen. But, Trump decided to step into this hornet's nest, and now this is what we've got. And Trump has said that he could also possibly tap into the U.S. oil reserves to get the prices down a little bit. But in the latest poll, almost 3/4 of those surveyed American voters expected the conflict in Iran to at least run for months or longer. 71% in the poll said they believe the war would go on for about a year or longer. That's kind of scary. And Trump, of course, called the war an excursion that would come to an end very soon. He keeps saying that every 2 weeks. It's very soon now. It's going to come to an end. And we're getting close to finishing up. But again, he doesn't have a timeline. So that's what's interesting about that. Now, since we're talking about the Iranian war, let's talk about how much money has been spent so far. And this is going to blow your mind. Again, just like with Venezuela, it was a good move that you got rid of Maduro, and the U.S. was in and out, all right? And now we've got some control of that to some aspect, although Trump still is taking all the money from the oils there and putting them in offshore accounts. We don't know what's going on with that. And I know that's the plan for getting to Iran. Israel and the United States want to get control of the oil in Iran and split the profits up between the two, besides bringing peace to the Iranian people. It's all about oil. Everything that we do more or less is about oil. It's about the money. And you can't say that it isn't, because that's really what it is. So let's talk a little bit about the cost of this thing. Now, the first 6 days of the war in Iran cost U.S. taxpayers $11.3 billion in munitions alone, according to Pentagon estimates reviewed by lawmakers. And experts say the ongoing cost could increase exponentially. The total does not include the cost of operating and maintaining the military force engaged in the war or battle damage sustained from Iran's attacks. The military used about $5.6 billion in munitions in the first 2 days of the conflict, and now they're already back to Congress asking for more money. All right? Billions and billions of dollars, folks. All right? And yet the economy here in the U.S. is crashing, but we can spend billions and billions of dollars for this thing. And this is why the voters are upset. Most Americans don't give a rat's about what's going on over in the Middle East. They give a rat's about where their next paycheck's coming from here. And this is why there's going to be a big wake-up call in the midterms. Now, the munitions cost was first reported by the Washington Post. The money spent on munitions and the added expense of any damage done to U.S. military infrastructure by Iran's retaliatory attacks on the U.S. bases aren't factored into the Pentagon's yearly trillion-dollar budget. Trillion, folks. Trillion-dollar budget. Given this deficit, President Donald Trump could ask Congress for more money, which he's already doing, to fund the war, but no such request has been submitted as yet. And again, this is a little bit old because, yes, they are already in the process of asking Congress for more billions of dollars. Smoke, it's smoke, folks. They say one thing and then yet they do another. So this thing just goes on and on and on. The money that is being spent is just ungodly. And the other thing that we need to talk about, as far as this ongoing battle here, as I get a sup of coffee. Gotta love these mornings. Is this Tomahawk missile that hit this school. And I'm running this footage now as I talk about this. So a U.S. Tomahawk missile appeared to have hit a school, killing 147 children. And the missile was supposed to be targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. And the naval base, which was adjacent to the school, where the Iranian state media says sources of children were killed, as you can see by this video, it looks like it's a U.S. Tomahawk missile. Now, Pete Hegseth and the military said, we are investigating this. Yes, we are investigating it. We're not saying that's our missile, but we're going to take a look at it, folks. So the footage, which was filmed from a nearby construction site, shows ammunition that experts said is consistent with American BGM or UGM 109 Tomahawk land attack missile that, of course, was launched from a ship. And it was striking the location at the RGC base. As the camera pans to the right, a huge plume of smoke can be seen from the direction of the school, where at least 168 children and 14 teachers were killed. According to Iranian state media, this adds a body of evidence that seemingly contradicts what President Donald Trump claims was an Iranian was responsible for that attack and not us, and tallies with CNN reporting, which Pete Hegseth completely lambasted on his recent presser that I just showed you earlier. He called CNN a worthless news organization, and they run crawls that are not in favor of the war, and they're out there, and he says he'll be glad when they're finally taken over by another company, which is true. CNN has been sold, and of course this is the whole plan of Trump. I'm digressing here a little bit, but it's the whole plan of Trump is to get every media outlet to be run by Republican-friendly CEOs, so everything that they talk about will be talked about in a positive light to the Trump administration. CBS has already started to flip, NBC a little bit, ABC has already been a flip, and now with CNN being taken over here shortly, of course, they're going to probably tone down their reporting on negative news articles about the Trump administration as well. So you all got to depend on people like our podcast and other podcasts out there that can bring you the news as it's really happening. Because freedom of the press is just that. Our right to report on things in journalism as we see it and offering commentary. That's our First Amendment rights and our right in journalism to talk about things. And CNN, of course, so far, before they get taken over, are reporting on things like this, where innocent children are killed and they're not collateral damage. If the U.S. was responsible for it, we need to home up for it and do something about it. So that's that missile attack. And that's a damn sad situation. And I know it happens in war, but to have, our own missiles do something like that and then try to deny it is not what we are here for. So sad, so sad. The other thing that I want to talk about too is, speaking of Pete Hegseth, is the money that this guy has been spending. It is it's crazy. And again, Pete Hegseth's Department of War or Defense, whichever you want to call it. I still call it the Department of Defense, just like I still call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. It's not the Gulf of America as far as I'm concerned. It's ridiculous, the things these people do. But anyway, he has spent millions of dollars on steak, salmon, lobster, furniture, and more. Now, in September 2025, the Pentagon spent $93.4 billion, that's right, billion dollars on grants and contracts, according to the government spending watchdog Open the Books. During the last 5 working days of the month, the Department of Defense spent $50.1 billion on grants and contracts, according to Open the Books, which notes that only 9 other countries spend that much on their military in 1 year. In 1 year, folks. That's they spend that. And Pete managed to spend that much in 2 to 3 days. And the Pentagon may have been in a rush to spend that money before the government's fiscal year ended on September 30th, as Open the Book notes. Now, if the Pentagon didn't spend the money, it would have forfeited the unused funds, and that would be a use it or lose it type of scenario. So, yeah, he went ahead and spent all that. Yeah. Now, the military typically saves its furniture buying for the end of the fiscal year, but according to Open the Books, the Pentagon averages $38.8 million on furniture in months outside of September. Since 2008, the Pentagon has spent an average of $257 million on furniture, and then in 2025, the Department spent $225.6 million on furniture, including $12,540 for fruit basket stands and $60,719 worth of chairs from Herman Miller, one which costed $1,800 on its own. The September 2025 spending spree reportedly went well beyond furniture. The military spent $2 million on Alaskan king crab, $15.1 million on ribeye steaks, and $1 million on salmon, $124,000 on ice cream machines, $26,000 on sushi preparation tables, and $139,224 on 272 orders of donuts per Open the Books. In 2025, the Pentagon spent more than $7.4 million on lobster tail in each of the months of March, May, June, and October. This had only been done once before in military history, in October 2024. In September 2025, the Pentagon spent $6.9 million on those lobster tails. You think I'm making this crap up, folks? I'm not. It's public record. And as I just said, there are other countries who hardly have that kind of a budget for a full year for their military. And Pete Hegseth managed to spend all of this money, within the past 6 months. Can you imagine how many, homeless people we could feed, or how much we could spend on affordable housing in this country, or how much of that money we could use to help feed people who are, or take care of our underprivileged kids, or people who don't have clothes. Can you imagine what we could do with that? Instead, we got to get lobster tails and ribeye steaks and things like that. That's what I mean. When you've got billionaires and the rich running the government, they don't care about anything but themselves. Now, I'm all in favor of, taking care of our military and making sure that they're fed well and stuff. I get that. I really do. I support our military 100%. But, when you got to buy lavish furniture and you're trying to wine and dine people and it's stuff like that. And, when you got Pete, buy me a drink Hegseth out there, Mr. Macho Man, just throwing money around like it's nothing, buying Steinways and crap like that. Well, that shit's got to stop, in my opinion. And speaking of Steinway, you know what that cost? $98,329. That's what they spent for a grand piano for Air Force Chief of Staff's home. For the Air Force Chief of Staff's home, they bought him a damn Steinway for $98,329. What the hell does the Air Force Chief of Staff need with a Steinway at that price? Folks, that is your tax dollars. I'm telling you, it is your money and my money. And I use that to help buy this guy a Steinway. Go out and buy your own damn piano. The government doesn't need to buy it for you. They spent $26,000 on a violin and $21,750 for a custom-made flute from a luxury Japanese brand. $21,750 for a flute. Now, there could also be many new fortresses at the Pentagon, since the military spent $111,000 in that category. Many of the goods purchased were made outside the United States. The Pentagon spent a record $6.6 billion on purchases from foreign governments and foreign-owned businesses in September 2025. Let me back that up. I mean, if you're going to spend this kind of money, why don't you spend it in the United States? Why don't you use U.S. manufacturers? Well, and see, and a lot of this stuff, I don't even know if it's bidded out. I mean, technically, you're supposed to bid, and I've worked with contracting bidding before. Now, I don't know if this was the only time that you can go to any source that you want is when if you were to bid it out, that source wouldn't be there. So they said they spent $6.6 billion on foreign government buying the stuff from foreign governments and not here locally in the U.S. You always hear this thing about buy America, God bless America, buy America. Well, you know what? We're going to spend $6.6 billion and spend it outside the U.S. We're not buying American. So anyway, there you go. This breaks a record set in September 2023, according to Open the Books. Between this and lifting the Russian sanctions and Russia now jacking up their oil prices that they're going to be delivering to the U.S., you can see where this thing is. This thing is going sideways, ladies and gentlemen, and all that billions of dollars being spent by the Department of War for crap. Yeah, really makes for good stuff there, doesn't it? And speaking of what, let's talk a little bit about the U.S. economy for just a moment. Now, the U.S. economy, hobbled by last fall's 43-day government shutdown, advanced at a sluggish 0.7% annual rate from October through December. Now, the Commerce Department reported Friday, just yesterday, in a big downgrade from its initial estimate. NBC News icon basically brought out this story. And, of course, other news outlets have picked this up, too, about the report from the nation's economy. The output goods and services was down sharply from 4.4% in last year's report. So, and now the fourth quarter numbers are out, and half of the government's first estimate of 1.4%. Economists had expected the revision to go the other way, and it didn't, and show stronger growth. We have not had stronger growth here. Our economy continues to be sluggish. Federal government spending and investments clobbered by the shutdown from this, and of course, as you already know, we already in a government shutdown again. Went at a 16.7% rate hike, hacking a 1.116% points off from fourth quarter growth. For all of 2025, GDP grew at 2.1%, solid, but down from an initial estimate of 2.2% from 2024 and 2023. In the fourth quarter, consumer spending grew at a 2% clip, down from 3.5% in the third quarter. Business investment, excluding housing, increased at a healthy 2.2% pace. So that's good. and likely reflecting money being poured into artificial intelligence, AI, which, of course, the Trump administration is now beginning to hate. But it was down from 3.2% in the third quarter. The U.S. economy, the world's largest, has shown surprising resilience in the face of President Donald Trump's policies, including sweeping import taxes and mass deportation. But the war with Iran has driven up oil and gas prices and now is clouding the economic outlook. So basically, on those numbers, there was some good news, but some of it isn't good news. In other words, we are not recovering as fast as the economists would like us to recover. And now with billions being spent with the war of Iran, the only people that are going to benefit from that is, of course, people who are defense contractors, because Trump has ordered them to start mass producing more things for missiles and our government and our military. And as you're all aware of, when you go to war, that's good for the defense contractors, but everybody else suffers. You baby boomers who still might remember, World War II and the Vietnam War, how things started to go in the tank. And of course, all they do is in the White House is tell you to suck it up, which, that people who've got lots of money in their savings or reserves, that's fine. But, 75% plus of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and they can't suck it up. They don't have the resources to suck it up. They're making maybe $2,000 to $3,000 a month. They're not making billions like the Trump family is. Okay. And before I switch to some other news here, just came out. I don't know if you caught this, but the investors who bought TikTok, so it becomes a U.S. entity, they have to pay the Trump White House over $10 billion. Now, what Trump is doing with that money, because he said he's a deal maker, he made the deal, so he should get some kind of commission. I don't know where that money's going. I don't know if it's going in the government funds and you and I as taxpayers are going to see that, or whether it's going into Trump's bank account. But that also just came out in the news. These investors have got to pay billions of dollars to the Trump White House for taking over TikTok and using it here in the U.S. So follow that story as well. All this stuff somehow Trump is making money off of this in the Trump family. No matter what we do, the Venezuela deal with the oil and what's going on with this, and somehow he's always putting money in his pocket. It's illegal as hell, but again, with a Republican-based Senate and House of Representatives, the Republicans are just going, whatever you want to do, that's fine, Mr. President. That's, we're behind you 100%. So let's move on to Florida news just briefly, because I wanted to follow up with you about this SAVE Act. All right. Remember I talked about that earlier? Well, the Florida House has approved legislation that would, get the SAVE Act on a Florida base through here. All right. And what I'm saying that is Florida's version of the SAVE Act has passed the House and has passed the Senate, although it's not going to pass on a federal level. Again, Ron DeSantis wants his version through, and it looks like it's going to happen. And what's going to happen is he'll sign this into law probably here very shortly. And it's not too bad here on a state level because I live here in Florida. In other words, if you've got the little star in your driver license, the real ID, well, you'll be able to vote. You can use your driver's license. What you cannot use with this new law is students cannot use their student ID. So if a student doesn't drive, 18 or older, and let's say for some reason they're in college, they just don't have their driver's license yet, well, the only way they'll be able to vote is that if they produce their birth certificate or a U.S. passport. Same goes to seniors. Let's say you're living in senior housing and you can't drive anymore. You're 75, 80 years old, and the doctor says, hey, you can't drive anymore. Again, they have to have their birth certificate or their passport, or they can't vote. Let's say you got married and of course you have your driver's license. Your driver's license has your married name on it, okay, and you got the real ID and you changed your name on you'll be okay. But let's say you didn't do that and your name is Jones, but your driver's license says Johnson. All right. Well, you're in trouble. You better bring your marriage license and your passport or your birth certificate. So you can see, here's the bottom line. I think this, for the Republicans, will come back to bite them in the butt. You know, a lot of seniors vote Republican. And a lot of these seniors maybe can't drive anymore. And so now you're saying, you know, they're going to have a harder time getting out there to vote because of these new laws that I can guarantee is going to take place. I know DeSantis is going to sign this into law. So, you know, I'm okay. I've got the real ID of my driver's license, you know, so I can still vote. Majority of people, I think, with this new law will still be able to vote in one form or another, okay? Is because they said if you got the real ID on your driver's license, you're good to go, because the Department of Motor Vehicles, you know, already checks all this stuff. And when you vote and they scan your driver's license, it goes into the DMV database. So, again, it's just more BS for the Republicans to whine and bellyache and say, you know, see what they want to do. Now, the other thing that has happened here in Florida, and this is so far has just passed the House, not the Senate, but they approved legislation that would ban local governments from funding, promoting, or taking official actions related to diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI initiatives. Now, the House voted mostly along party lines, 77 to 37, to approve State Bill 1134. Republicans reps Chip McCara, Hillary Castle, and Will Robinson, Paula Stark, and Jim Mooney joined all of the Democrats in opposing the bill. So there were some Republicans that said, no. Now, the Senate approved the bill last week. I apologize. I said the Senate didn't approve. I had to get into the story a little bit. They did approve it last week, and so my correction there. And it will now be sent to Governor Ron DeSantis for consideration. The measure is sponsored by Representative Dean Black from Jacksonville. He said that over the past decade, DEI has divided society into competing fractions, which is, I think, is bullshit. It has not. Not only have millions and millions of taxpayer dollars been wasted in the name of DEI, again, that's BS. This philosophy has fostered resentment instead of goodwill. It's just resentment with the Republicans, nobody else. And instead of merit, and it's divided our society against itself. The Republicans are the ones that actually divided it. So he told House members introducing this bill that it would be the best thing to do. So you want to know what's really sad about all this is the way this bill's written here in the state of Florida. Local governments have always, you know, let's say you have the St. Patrick's Day parade and somebody whines and bellyaches, we don't want a St. Patrick's Day parade because I'm not Irish, so the city can't pay for that. Groups that have supported LGBTQ events, they no longer will, as a government, be able to do that. Like the city of Orlando, if they put money in for a gay pride parade, they're no longer be able to do that. But on the same token, you know, and you know, we have a lot of Puerto Ricans here in the state of Florida, and there's been a lot of communities that have had, you know, Puerto Rican parades, you know, to celebrate the Puerto Rican Latino heritage. They can no government can no longer put money into that. So it's not only killing DEI in its form where they, you know, what the reason they're doing that, they don't want to support the minorities or anything with the LGBTQ community. That's really why they want to do this, you know. But the trouble is they're going to be stopping everybody, all cultures from this because of this. Because, you know, to get back to the story a little bit, they call it preferential treatment and special benefits to a person or groups based on that person's group's race, color, sex, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation, and promote, adopt training programming or activities designed to implement with reference to race, color, sex, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And so, you know, they may stop the LGBTQ, but they're going to have, by the way the law is written, they're going to be stopping everything else too. In other words, you just can't pick and choose. It's all or nothing. So with this new DEI law going into effect, all local state governments are going to have to cease funding anything. So here are some of the Women's History Month. You know, Women's Equality Day. Chinese New Year's or Easter. So that's all going to stop. You know, St. Patrick's Day parade, you fund that. So, you know, So it's the whole thing's a waste of tax dollars. One representative said, if we have to make so many exceptions to the rule, perhaps the rule is the problem. Republicans rejected that argument and just said, screw you, we're going to pass this. The only reason they want to pass this is it's all these holier-than-thou evangelicals getting out there. We need to stop the LGBTQ movement. This is really what they're targeting. We can't have cities sponsoring gay pride parades. Like they're going after Orlando, and some other Miami also does this. But they'll find other ways to get the parades funded. Without the city government's help. So, this is again. It's people who have their own views trying to force their own views onto everybody else. I'm right, you're wrong. That's what it's all about. So, so much for DEI. Until we get a Democratic governor in there or something, this is just all going to stop. Before I wrap up my edition of the Right Has Left podcast, I got one more little video to show you, and this just happened just the other day as well. And again, I've always said this, I have some concerns about Donald Trump's well-being and his mental health. How long has Caroline Leavitt been Trump's White House press secretary? Well, watch this clip. He seemed to forgot her name, and he seemed to forget who his press secretary is. Watch.
Doing a good job. And of course, Kellyanne Conway. Has anyone ever heard of her? She's fantastic. She's in there fighting. She's a Kellyanne. A friend of mine said, that Kellyanne, I admire her, the way she goes in and she screams at those people she's got us, meaning the media, because this is a man that doesn't do very well with the media. It's one of those things. But thank you, Kellyanne.
So, again, Mr. Trump, I hope after this, and you've embarrassed Caroline Leavitt, that you will remember who your press secretary is. Because as much as she has gone to bat for you, in fact, flat out lied on your behalf about things that are going on, I think you would owe her an apology. And I know you're under a lot of stress, Mr. President, but this is becoming more and more of a problem for him, and it's his mind wanders more and more and more, and there's a prime example. All right, that's my podcast for The Right Has Left. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I do look forward to your comments. I need you to start thinking more and more deeply about all the money that is being spent, not on the war in Iran, but the money that the State Department and the Department of War is spending, your billions and billions of dollars. And as the economy here in the U.S. begins to get, more and more suppressed, we got all this money that we can spend sending to Iran, but we, the people here in the U.S., who we should be being taken care of first, are suffering. We're trying to find ways to put food on the table and to pay for our gasoline. And this is what we're getting. So anyway, you try to have a good week. Until next time, this is Roy Garten. Take care.